So good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone, and thanks for attending this month's Oxford Computer Group's webinar. I am Steve Brugger, OCG US CEO, and it is my pleasure to welcome John Howie, this month's presenter. If you don't already know John, he's been doing security-related deployments and secure product development work for over 30 years for such diverse companies like LearningTree, Deloitte, Microsoft, and the Cloud Security Alliance, where he spearheaded the expansion of operations. For the past 8 years, he has taken on the CISO roles at Huawei and then Climate Corporation, a US-based subsidiary of Bayer. Subsequently, he has headed up Bayer's M&A IT security group and is currently the head of Bayer's cyber risk team. Like any CISO level position, John works in a pretty high pressure environment, which is probably why he likes hanging out in the low pressure environment of Seattle neighborhood pubs, which is where I spend time with him. By the way, John, while you were writing courses about NT security back in the 90s, I was delivering NT security courses for Microsoft all over the world. And it seems security seems so much simpler then. But looking back on it, I think it was really a case of we didn't know what we didn't know. So here we are about 30 years later, and things are a lot more complex, a lot more demanding. And we are anxious to hear what you have to say about how AI is going to make things even more complex for us. But before John presents, and for those of you that don't know Oxford Computer Group, I've got a couple of slides. And a final note, please feel free to type in any questions you have throughout the presentation. So Jackie, if you would go ahead and, or John, I guess you're doing this. So Oxford has been around for 20 years as an identity security organization. We've delivered over 1,000 enterprise projects around the world. We've been Microsoft's Identity Partner of the Year 8 times as a finalist, and we've recently, in 2023, we're a Defense and Intelligence finalist for the Microsoft Partner Ecosystem. We're 2024 finalists for the Microsoft Intelligence Security Association's Identity Trailblazer. And you can kind of gather from this that we have pretty deep connections with the Microsoft team, both in the field and at the corporate level. If you could advance, Jackie or John, to the next slide. And our services, planning and assessment, deployment, and managed services all around identity and the Microsoft Secure Platform. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to John. John, thank you again for doing this presentation for us this month.
Yeah, Steve, thank you very much. And Jackie, thank you very much for organizing all of this. So welcome everyone for attending today. We have an intimate audience. That's great. That means that it can be more dynamic, and please feel free to ask questions as you see fit throughout the presentation. Don't wait to the end. You can submit questions via the chat and other tools available to you, and we will get to them as we can. So thank you very much. Let's just jump in with an overview of what I'm going to be speaking about today. I'm going to talk about examples of use of AI by threat actors after a short introduction to the problem space. I'm going to talk about how AI might actually solve some of the challenges I'm going to discuss today. And then I'm going to give some practical advice, because I always like to leave with practical advice that you can take away and you can implement immediately, rather than just making you think the sky is falling and nothing can be done. In this case, it's not entirely true. There are things you can do, and I'll talk about them at the end. So let's start with an introduction to the problem space. And let's start with sea changes, things that have happened to us in the last few years, which have led to this problem. in a way that that it has really brought things to a head. It's not one particular thing. It's actually a combination of things that have happened. The sea changes are simple. A few years ago, we saw a dramatic shift to working remotely. That was driven by the pandemic, of course. There's not much we could do about that. It's a reality. We have to just live with it. But since that, there has been a reluctance for people to come back to the office. And that is causing real issues for companies in all kinds of ways. It means that, for example, that we don't really get to meet and interact with our colleagues in a meaningful way, but it has also other implications that I will talk about so we've seen businesses try to attract cheaper global talent, especially US-based business, because the cost of doing business in the US has increased. We've seen inflationary pressures on salaries. We've seen increased competition. Ironically, somewhat for people with AI experience, they're commanding top-notch salaries. But there's also a cheaper global talent pool available outside of the US that can do these same jobs. And so companies are now starting to look to see how they can attract overseas talent and have them work remotely, even if they have no presence in those countries that the talent is in. There's also a desire by business to attract diverse candidates to roles. That's a good thing. There's been plenty of studies that show diversity of experience, diversity of culture, diversity of thought, and diversity of lived experiences can actually enhance your company and its products and services and its delivery of those to its customers, driving up shareholder investment and value. So there's plenty of reason why we want to embrace diversity, but that has actually also created pressures, which we're going to discuss in this presentation. And lastly, the rise of artificial intelligence as a commodity tool. Now, if you know anything about artificial intelligence, it is not a new discipline. It is not a new field. Artificial intelligence goes back to the 50s and 60s. It was largely an academic discipline. And if you wanted to work in the space of artificial intelligence, you'd likely go off and get your undergraduate degree and then study for a master's or get your doctorate. And your doctorate would likely be in something like vision recognition, or knowledge-based systems, expert systems, etc. And you would then go off and you do postdoctoral work, largely in an academic setting, and you might even become a professor in artificial intelligence. And you do some interesting research in that. So your typical person working in artificial intelligence was in an academic environment or in a blue sky research organization. And what's happened in the last few years is there's a commoditization of the technology such that anyone, literally anyone today with a computer and an internet connection can take advantage of artificial intelligence in its current incarnation, in its current form. And that current form predominantly is what we call large language models or large language learning modules, or machines, LLMs. And that's the technology that's driving OpenAI's ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, and a number of other technologies in the marketplace today. Now, this has led to a number of recent headlines, some of which you may know about, some of which you might not know about. You may remember there was a writer's strike simultaneously with an actor's strike in Hollywood just last year. In fact, it was just resolved recently. There was a concern around generative AI. Generative AI is a term for the technology behind ChatGPT. Now, predominantly, you may have heard that writers in particular were very, very concerned that these technologies would take their jobs away from them. There was plenty of examples of books and screenplays, even poetry, theater plays that had been generated by tools like ChatGPT. You could go to ChatGPT, you could type in, write a screenplay for a movie with car crashes guns, and likable characters. And out would come the next version of Fast and Furious. The script wouldn't be great, but then you could argue Fast and Furious scripts aren't meant to be great, they're meant to be entertaining. And so Hollywood writers in particular really were concerned that their jobs would be stolen. But on the flip side, the actors and actresses in Hollywood had parallel concerns. There was a very famous joke or meme put out there where a YouTuber by the name of Kevin Pathrath created a video with Ryan Reynolds apparently endorsing Teslas. Of course, it wasn't Ryan Reynolds, and it was done in the style of Ryan Reynolds' other kitschy adverts, for example, for cellular communication companies or for alcoholic beverages or even for soccer clubs he might own. And so it kind of looked like him and it kind of acted like him, and it was his kind of style, but it was for a product that he was not endorsing. Now, it was done in such a way that it was an obvious fake. But there have been other instances going back to 2017 of all things, where then President Donald Trump was apparently seen on stage talking in perfect Mandarin, talking about the rise of China and how great China was. And that dates back to 2017. And the reality is that today technology is so good that it can in real time fake the appearance of an individual in a movie or in a video, and you will have great or extreme difficulty in telling that it's not actually that actor or actress. So there's a real concern there. There's also a concern on the use of artificial intelligence on identity theft. Banks today are struggling with approving people for loans, knowing that they are actually real individual people, natural persons, and not artificial generated persons. The technology has gotten so good that there's actually a track record of banks making loans to non-existent individuals. I'll talk a little bit about how that's accomplished later on, but it is a real problem today. Earlier this year, in the primaries and in the caucuses for the presidential election, voters in New Hampshire received robocalls from someone that appeared to be, or heard, if you listen to it, appeared to be Joe Biden, telling them not to bother to vote because he'd already sealed the nomination. That actually led to the government passing a law or an administrative law to prohibit the use of fake or robocalls using artificial intelligence to mimic candidates, because it was so realistic to the people receiving those calls. Earlier this year also, in a stunning attack, a scammer walked off with $25 million by essentially phishing a company in Hong Kong with a apparent Zoom meeting. They reached out to someone who had the position of authority to make financial transfers, appeared to be the chief financial officer of the company, along with other senior executives and managers, and instructed that person in a virtual meeting to transfer 25 million US dollars equivalent to a third-party bank account. That was a real-time apparent meeting using technology like Zoom or GoToMeeting, targeting an individual. That is taking phishing or spear phishing to the next level. And then lastly, college students everywhere who are under the age of 21 will be rejoicing in the streets. AI can now create realistic fake IDs. I have a friend who's a former bouncer for a bar in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and he kept in his pocket a stack of all the fake IDs he'd confiscated over the years. And some of them looked pretty pathetic, some were pretty good, but he showed me how the technology they use, the electronic technology, could be used to scan the barcodes in the back of IDs and detect the fakes, because people didn't understand how the barcodes worked. Well, artificial intelligence, by actually scanning real identity documents, has figured out all the formulas used by the states and by provinces in Canada and other countries around the world to fake identities, to create very realistic fake identities. And so now you can go online and you can type in a name, you can type in an address, whatever, you get your fake ID in the mail for about $100, usually sent to you from China. And it's actually artificial intelligence that's driving the creation of very realistic fake IDs. There are still ways that some technologies can detect them, but they tend to require you to be connected to a back-end system run by a state DMV or equivalent, or a federal government equivalent system. So these handheld scanners are now being fooled by these realistic fake IDs because artificial intelligence can now create very seemingly real fake IDs. There's also a lot of legitimate artificial intelligence services out there today which are being used for ill. They're being used by people for criminal ends, criminal means, and yet they're very legitimate systems with real legitimate business purposes. A great one, and I've personally seen this used in third-party risk management, where we look for vendors that we want to do business with, is organizations want to create a presence, a legitimate business presence that makes them look very real, makes them look established, makes them look bigger than they really are. They're kind of pushing the boundaries of truth. And so you can go to very corporate looking built websites. You can see that the companies exist on the local Secretary of State websites or registries. They pop up in search engine optimization results on Google, Bing, you name it. And they, on the face of it, appear to be very legitimate. And you have great difficulty in knowing that they were actually established by going to a service like GoDaddy Zero. You go to that service, you type in some basic information, you give it your credit card, and boom, you actually have an online presence for your business that it created for you by registering with the Secretary of State, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it does it very, very fast. And so now what you're seeing is cyber criminals build fake companies using artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is the key here because it builds these sites not using cookie cutter approaches, but tailored approaches using LLMs or ChatGPT equivalent to produce content which is tailored to, one, what the person wants, and two, that is likely to appeal to the targeted audience. So cyber criminals are now able to create companies very, very quickly using this technology, either by using the likes of GoDaddy Aero or by building their own systems to do it. So for pennies now, cyber criminals can create multiple companies. You still have and their presences, you still have the issue of registering with the Secretary of State or equivalent in foreign countries. That does cost hard money, but if you don't want to go that step of actually doing a registration, you can still create a very seemingly realistic online presence of a fake company very, very quickly, typically within a matter of minutes to a couple of hours. You're also seeing companies use social media presence to promote products and services. And if you do a quick search in this, some of it is very scary. Let's say you want to sell a nutritional supplement which it allegedly burns body fat. And you can use a ChatGPT or another. I don't want to make ChatGPT seem to be a bad actor here. It's not. It's a legitimate tool, but you can use it or one of the equivalents. And what you can do is you can say, I want to use social media to market my nutritional supplement, and I want to target a particular audience. How do I best do that? And these AI tools, these LLMs, will come back and say, well, you want to find someone or create a fake persona of a young woman, probably in her early 30s, who is married and likes yoga, and have her be a fake influencer for your nutritional supplement. And also these AI engines, these tools, will then connect to your social media accounts and start pushing out messaging from this fake influencer, this fake person, this fake persona created for the purposes of pushing a product or a service. For people who are looking for jobs, AI now provides resume builder services. You type in the type of job you want. You can even actually cut and paste in a link to a job listing. The tool will look at it. It will look at your resume that you created, and then it will rewrite your resume targeted to that job. And it does it in such a way that it pops in front of the recruiter. So the recruiter looks at it and goes, wow, this person's 110% fit for my job. I never thought I'd find that person. And these tools are becoming increasingly used. You're seeing them come mainstream. I believe LinkedIn now has one, but there's plenty of other tools out there in the marketplace. Again, a legitimate purpose, but it now allows people to create resumes tailored for positions. And I'll talk about why That's a problem and why it's being used by criminals briefly. AI recruiting is also a thing. You've got companies that are opening up positions and they get tens, if not hundreds of resumes. How do we find the right candidate for our position, given the number of resumes or CVs that we have received? You can go through them by hand, which is laborious. You're likely going to miss stuff. And so instead, you turn to use artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence will go through the resume submitted and it will find the ones that are best suited for the position. Well, you got a problem because people are now submitting AI generated resumes and you're using the same technology to identify candidates for your open position. And what happens is that that they match up very, very quickly. So you can start to imagine how cyber criminals can exploit that. But this AI recruiting technology goes beyond just receiving resumes and reviewing them. It will actually now proactively go out and crawl the internet, searching LinkedIn, GitHub, other sites, looking for potential candidates who don't even know they're candidates for an opening that you have. And then it will reach out to them and say, hey, we think you might be a candidate for this position. If you're interested, please contact us. And so now you're seeing recruiting go out onto the internet and crawl for potential candidates that can be used or can be brought in for interviews. But remember also that now you're also using artificial intelligence, potentially maliciously, to create fake web presences. And so you can start to see how the dominoes are lining up to all come down in one fell swoop. And then also you're seeing artificial intelligence used in digital identity verification. Again, going back to the sea changes, people are working remotely, working from home. We never see them in the office. So how do you onboard a new candidate? Let's say I open up a position. Our US headquarters is in St. Louis with a secondary position in Whippany, New Jersey. I personally am presenting right now from my cabin in the mountains outside of Seattle, except I could be AI generated. You might not know that. So how do you actually identify people and verify they say who they are? Well, what they do is they pull out their driver's license or their passport, they hold it up to the screen alongside their face, and artificial intelligence powered verification engines look at the picture in the government issued ID, do some examination of the ID, make sure it looks legitimate, right font, all that kind of good stuff, and then matches the face on the photograph to the person's face, except it's being done in 2D. And it says, yep, this person's a match, looks like the person in the identity document, and I believe the identity document to be valid. The person may have to switch a driver's ID around to show a barcode in the back, that kind of stuff. But artificial intelligence is now used to remotely identify people and verify they are who they say they are. And you can already imagine where I'm going with this. So artificial intelligence, these legitimate services, can start to be used for ill. So what's a practical impact to business? Well, I mentioned that Hollywood actors were concerned that their images were being used for ill, to create videos, movies, and so on. I mentioned the Joe Biden voice scam. You can already see, again, how this can be a problem in that voice authentication schemes are no longer trustworthy. In fact, my bank, we're seeing banks, in particular, my bank just did this, turning off their wire transfer by phone feature. Why? Because it used voice technology. I actually had to say a particular phrase which was tailored to me to identify myself to the system, and it was and so voice authentication schemes are no longer trustworthy because artificial intelligence can realistically create my voice or recreate my voice. Online verification of identity documents is also no longer trustworthy because artificial intelligence is now able to create very realistic fake IDs, fake passports, fake driver's licenses, etc. And because people are not examining them in real person and in real life, They might not notice that the paper's different, the plastic's different, the color is slightly off, because the online systems, they are able to defeat that or not able to recognize it, and it can be defeated. So if you have any system today that requires someone to show on a video camera in a meeting who they are, well, guess what? That might not be trustworthy any longer. Remember also the discussion I had, or the case I presented to you about that poor person in Hong Kong who received a request to join a video meeting with the CFO and senior managers and executives and asked to transfer $25 million to a third-party banking account. Phishing and spear phishing attacks are going to a brand new level. But also AI can be used to create very realistic emails or postings in forums and so on for waterhole attacks designed to attract people or designed to make something look legitimate. You know, we'd always see that email pretending to be from the CEO asking us to go out and buy 100 e-gift certificates at $25 each and transfer them to his personal email account because he was going to give them away at a company meeting. That kind of stuff not happening anymore. If you fall for that, you've got bigger problems. But AI can now create very, very realistic emails and requests that are tailored to the recipient, because we are very online people. Our profiles are out there. It's possible to now tailor attacks against us based on our online postings, because an attacker can gather all that information about us, know the kind of language that we respond to, how we respond back to things, and it can tailor attacks against us. Candidates that present themselves for open roles that you have may not actually exist. They just might not be there. That's a growing problem as well, and I'll talk about that in an example in a couple of minutes. And then traditional background checks might not actually be trustworthy at all either, because we're in a situation where it's now possible to create fake websites for fake companies that are tailored to look very, very real. We can use social media AI tools to create social media postings about ourselves. And so someone could create a fake persona who worked for a fake company or fake companies. And apparently when you do a resume check using social media, looking at companies they work for, there may be a blog on the company website, this fake company website that they are in. They start to look very legitimate online, and you're not actually meeting these people in real life. And also states have passed laws cracking down on credit checks and other things because they're seen as actually preventing access to diverse candidates. And some companies are voluntarily no longer doing credit checks on individuals because they want to attract diverse candidates. And it turns out that some diverse candidates may have poor credit and so otherwise would be ineligible for employment. So companies are actually now moving away from some of the traditional background checks. You're finding that background checks using social media presence, past companies, that kind of stuff, they're no longer trustworthy. That is a real challenge that we're starting to see emerge. So here are a couple of examples of use of artificial intelligence that attack identity, particularly by threat actors. This is a real scenario I'm presenting to you. It's not a new one, but it's evolved, and it's evolved through the use of artificial intelligence. Back in 2022, although this is not where the problem started, it's just when it was first really talked about, the FBI in the United States published an advisory to companies that North Korea, or the DPRK, was running a program to have its citizens work for US companies. This was in just after the pandemic. It started during the pandemic, but it continued after the pandemic and continues to this day because of the shift to remote work. And back then, what was happening was you would receive an email, an individual, and it would say, hey, I'm from Canada. I want to work with US companies, but I don't have a business license. But I can earn more working for a US company than I can from one here in Canada. Tell you what, can I use your email address? Can I use your computer, install a small piece of software on it? I'm going to earn $5,000 a month, and I'll give you $1,000 for the headache. $1,000 a month. And so some people went, yeah, sure, I'll take $1,003 a month. And so this person, allegedly from Canada, would install some software on their machine, and they would then send out emails or whatever, or resumes to companies. They would get employed by those companies, and these companies would want to do, new employee orientation. And back then, they would say to the person whose computer they were working with in the US, hey, go on the screen, answer the questions. I'll be in a chat. I'll tell you how to answer the questions that they ask you, so I can get this job. And so what would happen is during the interview, the candidate would be asked a question, and then they would wait for the response to come back up, and then they would say that back to the recruiter or the interviewer, and then they get the jobs. The goal was economic. It was to bring money to the DPRK. It was not designed to embed spies into Western companies, as some alleged. It was purely economic. Things have changed now. Artificial intelligence has made this problem even more real. You no longer need to find someone in the US to be this person that you work through, whose computer you take over. Instead, you can do it all through artificially generated video and audio. So someone who's in North Korea, who can VPN in or somehow or other get a US IP address, not that many companies care where the IP address is coming from, can present as a United States citizen with a US accent to a company in an interview. And then when they successfully get the job and they go through the E-Verify program, they are able to present a fake ID and a fake social security card using the name and number of someone obtained from a data leak, such as the recent AT&T hack, where 65 million accounts were compromised, mine included. Again, I think everyone in the world now knows my SSN. And by creating a fake persona online, social media, and companies, the DPRK citizens who are recruited and employed by the government of North Korea can now present as candidates to US companies pretending to be US citizens. And because many companies are no longer doing these deep background checks because they want to attract diverse candidates, you are finding that many of these people are getting hired at US companies. This is a real challenge, a real problem today. It's one that's not often talked about or discussed. When you discover them, they're quietly let go. Even companies that have very strong hiring practices in place and do credit checks and all the other traditional things that we used to do or demand potentially in-person identity verification or identity proofing, you're finding they're still vulnerable through contract organizations. So instead of now targeting companies directly, they'll target companies such as contract organizations, temporary labor organizations. And often a large company will say to a temporary contracting or labor organization, hey, you need to do background checks of all your staff, and you have to attest to this, and it's usually in the terms and the conditions of the contract that's entered into. And of course, this contracting company, consulting company says, of course we do background checks, of course we identity proof our staff, you can trust us. Well, can you really? Because you're starting to see these individuals from North Korea now coming into organizations at the back door through these consulting companies. So this is a very real and ongoing problem, and it's not been solved yet. Another one, and this is starting to peak, you're starting to see this happen more and more, and this is more for insider threat or a malicious threat actor. What they do is they're creating profiles over the internet on LinkedIn, GitHub, etc., using AI tools. Stack Overflow is another common one. They do it over time slowly to add legitimacy, so it's not a new social media presence or a new LinkedIn profile or a new GitHub repository with just a few things recently added. They'll do this over months. In some cases, as examples, this going back over a couple of years. I think in those cases, what's happened is the attackers are starting to leverage AI on programs they're already running. And so what they do is they create these very legitimate looking online presences. So when you want to go out and hire a principal site reliability engineer for your top tier web presence or digital product or service to your customers, and you want to search for a candidate, these candidates look immaculate. They've got these GitHub repositories with this code they've written. They've got this very authentic looking LinkedIn profile that's great but not excellent, so they don't appear too good. And oh, by the way, they're really responsive in Stack Overflow, telling people how to fix problems. And so when your AI recruiting tool goes out and searches the internet for potential principal SREs to come join your organization, it's going to find them. And then what happens is these people land at your company, because again, we don't require people to come in the office anymore. Or if we do, it's usually within 3 months of hire or whatever. And so the fake resume and the profile created online combined with fake identity verification online gets these people jobs at your organizations. Once they're in there, they begin to exfiltrate information that they're after. Or they'll plant malicious software, backdoors to your environment, or just plain old ransomware just to completely and utterly cripple you on day one. After the threat actor achieves their goals, they pull down everything, they disappear, you don't see them again. This is actually happening today. And the problem is we're not seeing people in real life, we're unable to properly identity proof them. It's creating these issues. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. I promise you, there is light at the end of the tunnel. First of all, AI is being used for identity and access management solutions. It's being built into them. If you've ever worked in healthcare, especially at the cutting face of healthcare, where you're either a clinician or a healthcare provider, doctor, nurse, whatever, and you're working with patients and you have to use electronic records, you've probably encountered UABA. You might not know it's there, but it's there. And what it does is it checks to see how you interact with healthcare records, and it makes sure you are who you claim you are by looking for patterns of use or abuse. For example, are you a doctor assigned to a patient, but now you're looking at another patient's medical records? Well, why are you looking at them? That is anomalous activity, and the UABA will pick this up. Well, it's being extended to other areas as well now. And so basically, identity and access management systems are looking to check for anomalous activity, either authentication or authorization activity, to see, well, maybe that person isn't who they claim they are. In fact, it's going further than that. There's all kinds of new developments in this area that's trying to identify patterns of use or misuse that would lead the system to credibly believe you're not who you claim you are. Microsoft has also built Copilot for Security with the Entra integration. This came out April 1st, I believe, was the official launch date. I've been to some of the Microsoft webinars. I've not had a chance to play with it yet, but it looks really cool. And it allows a security analyst to say, there might not be something quite right here. And so they'll say, show me all of the authentication and authorization records for XYZ. And the system will pull everything out and it will present a narrative to them that they can understand. So they're no longer hunting and pecking through audit logs, looking for information. Copilot and Entra integration will now tell you everything this person has done in Microsoft 365 or Azure or one of Microsoft's other online systems. And then artificial intelligence is being used over audit log analysis. Microsoft Sentinel is doing this. I'm sure Splunk is doing it. Others are doing it, looking for anomalous activity. For example, someone claims they're in the US, but that IP address is coming from a DPRK system or from systems that are believed to be compromised and potentially used by DPRK. Some of the vendors of Know Your Customer online identity verification systems are now using AI to detect potentially fraudulent documents. This is cutting edge. I would say that I've witnessed fake documents still getting through the system, but they're getting better. And as these systems continuously learn and are trained, they will get better and better and better. And so it now becomes an arms race. You know, what will come first? Will it be the ability to detect a fake identity document, or will it be a fake identity document? I personally believe that just the way that these systems are learning, you'll always have a small percentage of fake identity documents that will get through until they're learned and recognized and incorporated into the models, and then you'll see the models catching up to detect fake identity documents online. Facial recognition and voice recognition systems are improving. And again, it's a bit of an arms race here, that the ability to create fake personas in real-time video, real-time audio, is likely going to exceed the ability of those recognition systems to detect fraudulent use or fraudulent presentation. And this is really for that video spear phishing or phishing situation where, you know, you get asked to join a Zoom call. Well, hang a second, we use Microsoft Teams, but now I'm getting a Zoom call, but it's from an email address that appears to be my CFO. And the CFO says, hey, we're having problems with our presentation software, like kind of we had today. We're on Zoom as a backup. Can you join the meeting? And you're on there, and all of a sudden, what appears to be a room full of your senior executives saying, can you transfer $25 million? And I think that the detection technology that will be built into these systems in the future, even though it can train over legitimate meetings, there's still the likelihood that for the foreseeable future, the ability to create fake personas in real time and present them in video meetings will exceed the ability to detect them. Now, I mentioned practical advice, it's not all doom and gloom. The key thing to take away here is that the use of artificial intelligence in these attacks exploits vulnerability in technology, not in processes. We have seen a shift towards our use of technology in identity proofing online especially. If we were to go back to, for example, meeting people in real time in an office, or in a shared workspace like a WeWork or a Regis office or whatever, then the use of fake personas online, the use of fake identity documents that people show to the screen, to the camera, that largely goes away. The process isn't flawed, it's the use of technology to compensate for the lack of in-person identity proofing that has led to this weakness, this vulnerability. So consider how AI can be used to circumvent your use of technology, and then consider what other administrative or technical compensating controls you can put in place, because there will be things you can do, and not just identity proofing online, but in other things as well. Insist on in-person interviews and meetings wherever possible. Even if you're unable to meet with someone at one of your locations, again, there are other companies that may be able to provide you services where someone comes in, signs in, checks in, sits down, and meets with you over a telco connection, teleconference connection, but they've had to sign in to a physical location that is somewhat trustworthy. Think, for example, when you take professional certification exams. It used to be in the old days, you would wait once a quarter or once every 6 months or potentially even annually for an exam to take place. All the candidates would turn up, they'd all have to bring their ID, they were all photocopied, checked in, and then you'd sit down in a big room and you'd all do your test. We no longer do that. We now go to testing centers where your identity is checked, and you sit down at a computer and then you take the test there at a time that you reserved. That model may well work for in-person interviews and meetings. We just have to find a solution to make that happen. When it comes to money and other sensitive information, you need to reinforce processes around the security of that intellectual property or that money. You know, we're all told, if you get a phishing email from your CEO saying, please buy $125 gift certificates electronically and email them to me at my personal email address, you know it's a phish or a spear phish attempt. train our staff, up-level our staff, upskill them so that they know that AI phishing and spear phishing exists. If you get a request to join a Zoom call or a GoToMeeting call or a WebEx call or even an MS Teams call, and it's not your preferred system, or if the request comes from an email address that's outside your company organization and it appears to be your CFO, it's a phishing attempt. Report it. Don't act upon it. Investigate AI-based solutions to identify new technologies. There's also or threat actors. There's all these new solutions coming to the market. Some are better than others. In fact, there's probably too many on the market today of low quality. The market will shake itself out. You might have to use third-party reports from reputable organizations, research organizations that will point you in the right direction of AI-based solutions to identify possible threat actors. And then lastly, most importantly, stay abreast, informed of the tactics, techniques, and procedures used by threat actors, especially when they're AI-based, because that will help you know how these threat actors are evolving, how they're likely going to compromise you, how you might be vulnerable, and you can take steps to defend yourself. So it's not all bad. There is some practical advice there. Take it, use it, and this is a continually evolving area. It's a new area for us. We're seeing cybercriminals and others use AI in new ways. It's always going to evolve. As AI gets better, they're going to use it more. We have to hope that AI controls to protect our organization, security controls, keep up. But at the end of the day, we need to stay abreast of what those attacks are, the TTPs, and we need to make sure that we're on top of them. And so with that, I'm going to hand it back to Steve or Jacqueline to field any questions we have.
Hey, John, while you were talking, I was thinking about all of the qualified candidate spear phishing emails I get every single day. And I appreciate you playing out the completeness of that scenario. I swear to God, I've never clicked on them. You read them and it's pretty clear they follow a pattern, but the entirety of that attack was quite an eye-opener for me, so thanks for that. We do have a little bit of time here and can field any additional questions if there are any. So from a priority standpoint, John, with all of these attacks coming in the door and all of the other things on your plate, what are your primary priorities in addressing some of these things on a day-to-day basis for your team?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right now, we're really looking at the use of artificial intelligence to look at identity and access management from a detective perspective. We are looking to see how we can detect potentially anomalous activity. Even if someone does get through the hiring process and they're a remote worker and they don't come into a physical office when we hire them, we know what job they're given. We know what they're supposed to be doing, how they're supposed to be accessing systems. So are they actually accessing the systems they're meant to be accessing, or are they doing other things? That's not new to security. You should always have kept an eye out for people trying to access things not permission to access. But now we're using artificial intelligence to enhance that capability. And so that's a key area for us. We are using online verification of documents and know your customer scenarios, mainly for business partners, business relationships. And so we're looking at how our vendors, because we rely on vendors to provide the technology, we're looking to see how they're using artificial intelligence to detect fake IDs. That is a real thing for us as well. We don't want to be in a situation where you've got a real-time video feed of a candidate or a business partner holding up what appears to be a driver's license issued by Washington State, for example, but both they are a fake image and the driver's license are simultaneously fake, but they match each other because of artificial intelligence. So we're looking to see how our business partners are utilizing artificial intelligence in those areas because that's not our core competency, that's theirs. So it really is on the detective side and in the KYC space. We are using artificial intelligence to go search for diverse candidates. We have not yet examined the issue about how we look for fake candidates in the artificial intelligence generated recruitment process. That's a problem. That's a gap for us, and so we're evolving. We're responding. I'd like to say we are being proactive. We're not. We're being more reactive than anything else right now, and I think most companies are. I think very few companies, unless you're a vendor in this space, you're being reactive, and I think that's understandable. But at some point, we have to get off our back heel and be proactive and actually go out and look for these problems before they hit us.
I've got another question for you. You know, we hear all about zero trust. One of the tenets of zero trust is continuous authorization. Is that a mechanism for helping to identify these AI types of attacks and intercept them? Or if it's not, what are other tenets of zero trust approach that help you provide a more secure environment?
Yeah, so it depends on the implementation. Zero trust with continuous authentication and authorization. If it embeds attribute-based access control, ABAC, and one of the attributes is IP address, then yes, it might work. It might detect anomalous activity. So for example, going back to the very real issue we see today about citizens of the DPRK North Korea appearing as US citizens and getting jobs, either as direct hires or as contractors through contracting agencies. You know, if they initially worked through a US computer system with a US IP address and started using that, but the IP address changes, especially if it changes to foreign countries, then ZTNA and ABAC with ABAC as part of it will definitely catch that. Whether or not you then disable access or query the access and follow up with it's a different story. But yes, it should be detectable. There is the possibility for ZTNA to have a role here to again detect these attacks, but it's after someone already has identities, credentials issued to them. And so the problem comes back to how do you proof identity to natural persons in a reliable way so that you know someone is who they claim they are when the credentials are issued, the identity is issued. That's where the real weakness that we see today is. And so you're on your back heel, you're using detective technologies when it may already be too late.
All right. So I don't see any questions queued up here. John, I'd like to thank you for doing our webinar this month, and it was very informative. I ended up with even more worries that are going to keep me up at night. So thanks for that. But it is a very dynamic environment, and our ability to intercept the bad guys is something that we all have to stay on top of every single day. We primarily do this on the back of Microsoft's Azure platform, and the security controls that they're putting in place, their large-scale sampling of these threat interfaces, those are all things that help us stay ahead of the curve. Thanks again, John, and hope you're enjoying the Seattle weather. Maybe it'll get sunny eventually.
Oh, it's nice and sunny here east of the mountains.
Okay. Oh, that's true. You're east of the mountains, so you get the sun. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone who attended. Thank you, John. Thank you, Jackie, for making it all work. And we will see you again next month.